things that I absolutely love in terms of Agile buzzwords and key phrases. The word adaptive, I think, summarizes Agile beautifully. So as an adaptive methodology and adaptive mindset. So I think that word, great word, really want to keep that one. Retrospective, one of my favorite words, for sure, and one of my favorite things in Agile. I think if you're going to do anything, if you're going to take any little piece of Agile, then take a retrospective, because it's a really powerful way of thinking and set of activities, games and tools that you can use. Flow, one of my favorite words, all about finding flow. So it's not about fast, it's not about doing things as quickly as possible. It's about actually gaining that flow, that maximizing that flow, which actually maximizes not just the value and the time, but also the quality as well. So maximizing and optimizing flow, I love. Iteration. I love the word iteration. Often when I do introductions, it's one that people haven't heard before. And for me, iteration is like repetition, but it's different to repetition. Repetition for me is doing something the same over and over again. Whereas for me, iteration is doing the same thing, but looking to change and improve every time. So doing it again, but doing it better and better and better. Sprints, love the sense of sprints. So running sprints rather than marathons, having short sprints of work, I think it's a really lovely word that people catch onto and get really quickly. Slack as well, another S word that I absolutely love. So making sure that we've got that slack to change and improve for those uncertainties, for those unplanned things, and those things that are going to take longer than we first thought. And swarming a problem, I love the idea of swarming a problem in that kind of positive sense of we've got a challenge, we've got an issue on the team, we're going to swarm that as a team, and we're all going to work together to fix and find that solution. Pivot. It's a bit of a buzzword, and I think it's become one of those words that people aren't as keen on because it's become a little bit overused. We need to pivot. But I do love the sentiment of pivot and persevere, which Eric Ries has in his Lean Startup book. And you know, I think we need to acknowledge that need to pivot, but not over pivot as such, and not overuse these things. Another one of Eric Ries talks about in his book, minimum viable product. I often talk about minimum viable solution, just because of the nature of the teams and organizations that I work with. But again, minimum viable, that viable being the really important word there, that it's not just about the cheapest, quickest thing that we can get out there. It's actually about creating something that's viable and delivering value and meaning for the customer. There's some other great little acronyms as well. So things like test-driven development, behavior-driven development. I love those. VUCA, the volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. Moscow as an acronym, the must, should, could and won't or would like to have. Love that as an importance prioritization planning tool. And t-shirt sizes as well, so using t-shirts. And just kind of looping back, the build, measure, learn cycle, I think is really great again, especially if you're starting something. I tend to think of it as kind of learn, then we'll build, then we'll measure it, then we'll learn some more from that measurement, and we'll build and we'll measure it. But actually Eric does put build first, and I think there is a good reason for that, because often when we start something, we do kind of get caught up in planning and learning and research. So I think actually to have that sentiment of building that minimum viable product and getting out there quickly, and actually using that to learn and experience and understand and validate our idea, is a really great approach. And gosh, I could go on, because they're continuous improvement, continuous delivery. There are so many words that I love in Agile, and I could go on and on. So let's just think about some of those words that actually I'd like to change. So I'd like to change and improve them. And I just mentioned Vucker actually, and I think actually ambiguous is probably a really good word, one I like in that sense, but from the perspective of words I'd like to change or improve, one of the reasons is because I think often the words that are currently used are quite ambiguous and can be taken different ways. So I think probably one of the most talked about is often scrummaster. So I've got nothing against the role of Scrum Master at all. I think it's an absolutely brilliant role, but I do think it's misunderstood. And I think one of the reasons that it's misunderstood is because of its title. And so I often talk about sprint facilitators, somebody who facilitates a sprint, because I think that is a better descriptor of the role of how what I feel a Scrum Master is, at least, which is somebody who helps to support the process of a team being agile. So they help to coordinate and organize and facilitate that, but they're not really involved in the content. So it's not really about them telling, you know, they're not master of anyone as such. I don't really know where the sentiment of master came from when the word was, when the job title as such was made up. I kind of think chess master, maybe it's kind of chess master. Makes me think of the Queen's Gambit, you know, somebody who's a master. Also, Dan North used to talk about mastery rather than software craftsmanship, software mastery, in that sense of becoming a master of your trade. And I think perhaps, you know, somebody who is, you know, really well versed in the methodologies and the tools and the mindset of Agile, you know, is a master of Agile, perhaps. But as I say, this word is a bit ambiguous. And so, you know, master can also kind of infer control, it can infer somebody who's in charge and directive. And so often I meet teams that have got a Scrum Master who is setting the team's work. So they are getting involved in the content, they are deciding and setting and scheduling the team's work for the sprint. And for me, that's not the role of a Scrum Master. And I think sometimes like I say, the job title in itself can be ambiguous and therefore can be misleading and lead people to thought. I think actually master as a word is quite full of ego as well. So it's a little bit of an ego word. So again, you know, we kind of want to, we don't really want to see that power, you know, play in terms of a job title either. So yes, I would use sprint facilitator, and that's what I tend to talk about. The next one is another job title actually, which is product owner. And when we first all started talking about product owners at conferences and product managers and this kind of different roles, the sentiment was really that we needed the customer on the team, that as part of this cross-functional agile team, that it was inclusive and collaboratively and worked really closely with the customer and the user, and was very orientated to, you know, delivering for the customer, that they should be on the team. And so this role of product owner, the owner of the product, would be on the team, advising on the priorities, the business and the organization. So this is what's urgent, this is what's important, these are must-haves, these are should-haves, you know. And so actually, you know, initially it was a good name, but the thing is what I've seen more and more and more now, and it seems to be kind of being backed up by the methodologies as well, is that this is actually an internal role rather than an external role. So you get a product owner on the team who is within the organization that's delivering the service of the product. So they don't own the product. And again, owner is this kind of has power to it. as a word. So, you know, in some senses that's a good thing, but in other ways it can be a challenge. And so I use the word product guide because I feel like they are guiding the product. And then, so if we have got somebody who's the actual customer in on the team, then that's great, and a product owner. But if they're not actually, if they don't actually own the product, if they're not the ones going to be using and essentially paying for the product, then they don't necessarily own it. So I think, again, it's an ambiguous word that is misleading and is causing issues in terms of how it's being applied, because those assumptions are being made based on the words that are being used. And actually, you know, so I own the product, you know, I take accountability, responsibility, great, but I shouldn't be maybe taking control and, you know, and going into that directive mindset. Again, we want to keep that collaborative, kind of open, equal mindset. So moving on to a few other words in Agile that I would like to change or improve. I could talk an awful lot more as well about some of the job titles in Agile and how I think that they could be improved. I don't see any reason why we can't change and improve these things. It seems somewhat ironic to me, actually. That brings me to another word, it's manifesto. I'd rather we use code or guide or guidelines or something like that, because I think manifesto is very absolute. And also, again, you know, ambiguity in terms of manifesto, it sounds very political, you know, often these days it sounds has different references. So I think we could use a softer word that is a more collaborative kind of word. Within the manifesto, actually, because I do think there is an irony to the manifesto, because there is a line at the bottom that says, you know, that you must not, if you're going to replicate this, then you must replicate it exactly, you mustn't change it. And yet Agile is a methodology all about continuous change and improvement. So the fact that the manifesto has stood still for 20 years doesn't serve it very well in terms of being an Agile document. Yes, it stood the test of time, but actually there are there's one keyword that I would change in the manifesto, and I have had feedback that there is agreement on this from people who actually created the manifesto, which is that it should be solution, not software, because yeah, because then it makes more sense, I think, if we use the word solution rather than software. And also another thing in the principles that I would very much like to see changed is creating a constant pace. I would like to see that change to creating a sustainable pace, because I don't think an Agile team is about creating a constant pace. I think it's about creating flow, and I think it's about creating a sustainable pace. So not everybody, we cannot all work flat out all the time, and we see so much burnout and so much happening now within Agile around well-being and around burnout, that I do believe, you know, it's because we're trying to create this constant pace, and actually, you know, we need to be looking at creating a sustainable pace, something that boosts our growth and our productivity, yes, but also sustains our well-being and the performance of the organization and the values in its beliefs as well. And I think the final one that I think I'll just flag up is the word coach, because the role, so again, it's a role of calling people Agile coaches. I've just done a little video actually about the different hats that I wear. And if we're thinking about a coach, if we think about it, you know, in the sporting sense, the coach isn't doing it for the athlete. They are helping them to be the best athlete that they can be. They can't do it for them. They can't exactly tell them what to do. What they can do is help them to continuously learn and improve. So if they were telling them what to do, they would be putting a consulting hat on or a mentoring hat on if they were sharing their experiences. So I think, again, the use of the word coach can be a little bit ambiguous, because often agile coaches are more like consultants. And I think, you know, if you're going to put on a hat on that says, I'm going to come in and I'm going to tell your team, you know, exactly how you can change and improve and do better, there's nothing wrong with that. So just call it what it is. If you're going into a team or organization and saying, hey, I don't know what the solution is, but I've got the tools and the methods to help you find out, and I can ask you the right questions, and I can put different hats on to help you to get there, then you're coaching. So, you know, I think we need to be really careful sometimes about the language that we're using and how assumptions can be attached to those things, and different perceptions of those words. And so I'm really interested to know really if people agree or disagree with my list. So my keep list was adaptive, retrospective, flow, business, build, measure, learn, iteration, sprint, slack, continuous improvement, continuous development, swarming, pivoting, minimum viable product solution, volatile, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, Moscow, t-shirt sizing, TDD, BDD, all these different wonderful words that we should definitely keep, that have great positive agile feelings and meanings to them. And then ones that I'd like to change and improve: scrum master to sprint facilitator, product owner to product guide, coach to consultant as necessary. So looking at the different hats: am I training, am I coaching, am I consulting, am I facilitating, am I managing, am I leading, what am I doing, what hat am I wearing? And let's be clear about that so that the people that we're working with can be clear about what they can expect from us. Manifesto to code or guidelines, software to solution, and changing that constant pace to a sustainable pace. Oh, one I didn't mention was stand-up meeting. So I do love the original sentiment of stand-up meeting, and I used to use it loads, but I think in the world of remote, it doesn't quite work as well. And also, again, it's quite ambiguous. It has quite negative connotations. Whenever I've introduced it as stand-up, quite often we'll end up changing it and calling it something else. And actually check-in sticks really well with a lot of teams. Say this is our sprint check-in. So it doesn't have to be a daily stand-up. You know, if you're only working on a project once a week, then you don't need to be having a daily stand-up. So this is where, you know, what I'm saying about, you know, agile needs to actually mold and fit to your organization and change and evolve. That is the absolute essence of agile. So yeah, really interested in what you might think, any opinions on these words yourself, and so do share in the comments. I'm Belinda. If you like this, then do subscribe. I'd like to talk about this more, so any questions or thoughts that you've got, please do share them. I think it's a great conversation to open up. Agile's been around a long time now, and I think we need to have a look and see what we need to change and improve, and start to make some of those movements to make sure that Agile is, you know, diverse, inclusive. It thinks about the well-being and the sentiment of agility and the mindset of agility, as well as the methods and tools and the productivity and the performance. So thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you again next time.